3 days had passed since Emma disappeared into the woods behind our house. It wasn't like her to go off alone, especially without her phone. We searched everywhere calling her name, hanging posters, pleading with neighbors. The woods were deep, tangled, and doled. The kind of forest that swallowed sound. After the first day, I started fearing the worst. By the third, the police were talking about calling off the search. Then, just after midnight, I heard the gate creak open. I looked out the window, and there she was barefoot. Her white shirt stained with mud and something darker, standing motionless at the edge of the backyard. Her hair clung to her face in wet strands, and her hands hung limply by her sides. I rushed out, barefoot myself, heart thudding so loud I could barely hear anything else. My voice caught in my throat when I called her name. She turned her head slowly, not like a person responding to a voice, but like an animal reacting to a sound it didn't understand. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I froze. Something in her stare didn't feel right. It wasn't confusion or relief. It was blank. Empty dot. She didn't run to me. She didn't cry. She just stood there. When I got closer, I noticed her feet were filthy, scratched, and bleeding, like she'd been walking over thorns and rocks. Her fingernails were broken, some caked in dirt. She had no memory of where she had been. She said nothing at first, just blinked slowly, her head tilting to one side as if studying me. I wrapped a blanket around her and brought her inside. She didn't resist, but she didn't help either. Body moved like a puppet, passive and strange. I tried asking her questions, but she just stared out the window, lips parted, eyes unblinking. When the police arrived, she simply told them I got lost and nothing more. No one pressed her. They were just happy she was alive. But I wasn't Dot. As I helped her into bed, I noticed something beneath her ear, a mark thin and circular, almost like a symbol burned into the skin. I reached to touch it, but she caught my wrist in one quick movement. Her grip was ice cold. Dot. At first, I tried to convince myself that Emma's behavior was just trauma. Anyone would be shaken after disappearing for 3 days in the woods. But within hours, the oddities became impossible to ignore. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, her responses were clipped, flat, like she was reading lines from a script she only half understood. Her voice sounded the same, but her tone was hollow, empty of emotion. She started doing strange things. She would stand completely still for long stretches of time, staring at blank walls or sitting motionless on the floor of her room with her head tilted back and her mouth slightly open, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. One morning, I found her in the hallway at 4 a.m., standing outside my door, just standing, not knocking, not moving. Our family dog, Milo, wouldn't go near her. The moment she walked into a room, he'd growl low in his throat, then scurry out with his tail between his legs. He used to sleep at the foot of her bed. Now he refused to go upstairs at all. Dot food went untouched on her plate, yet she never seemed hungry. Sometimes I'd hear her moving around the house in the middle of the night, but her footsteps were too light, almost gliding. Once I found her in the kitchen, standing with the refrigerator door wide open, staring into it like she didn't understand what it was for. She began drawing strange symbols in the condensation on windows and bathroom mirrors, circles with jagged lines. Always the same. I'd wipe them away, and they'd return the next day. When I asked her what they meant, she smiled faintly and said, "I don't remember drawing anything," her eyes never meeting mine. The house itself began to change once Emma came back. It was subtle at first, cold drafts where there shouldn't be any lights flickering even after we had the wiring checked. Doors that I knew I had shut would be found wide open, and mirrors would fog over without any steam. At night, I'd hear faint tapping sounds coming from inside the walls. Sometimes it was soft, like fingers drumming. Other times it was frantic, like something trying to get out. Milo refused to enter Emma's room, and I couldn't blame him. The air in there felt heavy, like walking underwater. Her walls stayed damp, no matter how long the windows were open. There was a smell too faint at first, like wet earth, but it grew stronger with each passing day. It reminded me of rotting leaves, mixed with something sour and metallic dot one night. I walked past her room and saw her reflection in the mirror, but she wasn't facing it. She was sitting on her bed, back to the mirror, but the reflection showed her staring directly at me. I froze. Her eyes in the mirror were black, not the Hazel I'd grown up with. When I looked into the room, she was still sitting calmly with her back turned. I started waking up with scratches on my arms and legs. Nothing deep, just small, thin marks that burned when touched. I changed the sheets. I checked the bed frame for nails. Nothing explained them. I never saw Emma enter my room, but I often woke with the sense that someone had been there. Voices started whispering through the vents. I couldn't make out the words, but they always came when Emma was in the house. They'd grow louder. If I tried to ignore them, I was no longer sure we were alone. I needed to know what was happening, and there was only one place to look: the woods. Emma had come from there, and something told me that whatever changed her began in those trees. One night, when she slipped quietly out the back door, I waited a few moments, then followed. She didn't notice me. Her movements were strange, jerky at first, then fluid, like she wasn't walking but gliding just above the ground. Her head tilted slightly upward, and she never looked side to side, like she was following a path only she could see. The woods were silent. No insects, no birds. Even the wind felt unnatural, moving through the trees without a sound. I stayed far back, hiding behind thick trunks and brush, careful not to step on dry leaves. She walked for nearly 15 minutes into the heart of the forest before reaching a clearing I'd never seen before. It was perfectly circular. The trees around it leaned inward, as if something had pulled them unnaturally. In the center stood several tall, thin figures. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence was overwhelming, like the air itself bent around them. They were wrapped in darkness, silhouettes darker than the night surrounding them. Emma stepped into the middle and knelt. The figures slowly began to shift, tilting their heads in unnatural unison toward her, like acknowledging a returning piece of themselves. One extended an impossibly long arm and hovered it above her head. She didn't flinch. I covered my mouth to stop myself from gasping. Then all of them turned at once toward me, even though they had no eyes. I felt their gaze pierce through me, colder than any winter wind. My legs refused to move, my heart crashing in my chest like a warning drum. I ran, I don't remember how long or how far, just the sound of my breathing and the trees whipping past as I stumbled through the dark. By the time I reached the edge of the woods, the sun was beginning to rise. I locked every door behind me and didn't sleep for 2 days. But Emma came back like nothing happened. She moved through the house with that same eerie calm, like she belonged, but something deep in my gut told me whatever came back was only pretending to be her. She watched me constantly. At first, it was subtle-juiced, a glance held too long, or catching her reflection staring when she should have been turned away. Then it became bolder. I'd wake in the middle of the night to find her standing at the foot of my bed, her face blank, her hands twitching slightly at her sides. When I'd speak her name, she'd vanish into the hallway without a word. I found notebooks in her closet filled with unfamiliar, hand-spiraled symbols and drawings of long-limbed figures surrounding a dark circle. The same symbols she had drawn in steam on the mirrors were burned into the pages. When I asked her about them, she smiled and said she didn't know how they got there. Even when others came by, friends, neighbors, she acted normal. Too normal. Her tone, her expressions, all too measured, like she was mimicking what she thought a human would be. They all said she looked better, healthier, but none of them saw the way her eyes followed me after they left. None of them heard her whispering behind my bedroom door at night, or the scratching sounds that came from under my bed when the lights were off. She wasn't sleeping anymore. I knew because I started watching her, too.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.